This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Friday morning. It's January 26th, and we have both of the Wolves' wins this week against Washington on Wednesday in Washington and in Brooklyn on Thursday to discuss. We didn't do an episode after the Washington game, so we're going to kind of put these both together, probably focus a little bit more on the Brooklyn game. I have Kyle Theige here with me for the Friday pod. How are we doing, Kyle?
We're doing well. January 26th, 2024. Happy Australia Day to all our friends down under, and happy Spouses Day to all those who celebrate. And Dane, more than anything, happy 32 and 13 Friday, because we've lost the way a little bit, but 19 games over 500. You would think if you woke up in a coma on Tuesday morning that you are covering, following, cheering, buying season tickets for maybe the worst franchise in all of sports. But the way I look at it, according to the internet, it looks like they have the second best record in the league. 6-2, I think, since that Celtics loss, right? After, the death march or whatever. So two pretty dumb losses. You've done a good job with Britt and everyone else. Thunder loss, stupid. Bad late game execution. Hornets game, embarrassing, disrespect to the basketball gods. But they just kind of continue. This is the trend, right? Just grind out wins. And another ugly one last night, but back-to-back games, Wizards and
I like grind. I like ugly more than grind out.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, because it's both, right? Like you're totally right, and I'm seeing a lot of what I've seen too is there's a lot of fear and chaos and everything of like, is this slipping away? And obviously, a lot of that is reactionary for the reasons that you pointed out, because they have an awesome record and have broadly been awesome the whole season. I think it's just kind of like a little bit of both. And I think the end of games and fourth quarters are the perfect way to kind of encapsulate what is both exciting and intriguing about this team, right? And it's kind of the story of the whole season. They're a bad offensive team. They're an elite defensive team. And those things are exacerbated in fourth quarters. They are 19th in offense for the season. They are 27th in offense in fourth quarters this year. They are number one in defense for the season with a defensive rating of 108.6. And in fourth quarters, they still have a defensive rating of 108.6, which is somehow second because Portland has a better defensive rating than that, which to me just means nobody tries against Portland in the fourth quarters. Pretty sure that's what it is. But there's like some clarity in that they have a 108.6 defensive rating, which is awesome for the season, and it's the exact same in the fourth quarter. The defense is extremely bankable, as bankable as anything could be. Obviously there's ups and downs. It's excellent, and the offense is static in what it is, right? Average, and different things fuel it at times and different things kill it at times. Right now, fueling it is Karl-Anthony Towns. Last three games, where we were just saying before we hit record, they has like 120 points, and obviously 62 of those came in the Charlotte game, but he's really followed up those two games with excellent offense in the last two as well, driving the ship for the Wolves in these two games, while Anthony Edwards has now taken a step back into being a little less effective offensively, particularly in the fourth quarters. It's the things have to come together more for this team to get better offensively, but they do have the baseline of an elite defense that I think is making it that even in times when we're feeling a little frantic, that you go, well, the defense is keeping them 6-2 over the last 8, or 32 and 13 over the season.
Do you know who they've become?
No.
They're the Tom Thibodeau Timberwolves. Yeah. Right? Like, so I was just looking over the last 10.
No. No, the Tom Thibodeau, what the Tom Thibodeau Timberwolves were supposed to be.
That doesn't mean, yes, the ideal, the
season.
wet dream of Tom Thibodeau. Because I was looking over the last 10 games, number 1 in defense, number 16 in offense. That is the Knicks, and boy, do people love the Knicks lately. The Wolves are number 3 in defense and 20th in offense over the last 10 for net 8th in net rating. So It's just, again, they're the Wizards game, last night's game against Brooklyn. I'm in it. And again, happy Australia Day to our guy, Jake Painting. Like, I see some of the offensive stuff. Last night, we only have a couple more weeks of football, so we're going to keep pumping football analogies. But last night in the fourth quarter, they just basically punted on first down. They were just, we don't even want to try to score. We're just going to punt and then play defense. And it's awesome. That defensive clip you posted on Twitter where Ant basically locks down Mikal Bridges for almost the entire shot clock, and Jaden's literally, like, during the play clapping him on, which is some of the most shit-talking you could ever do just while the play is happening, was awesome. But offensively, just, it's going to bite them. So, again, 32-13, I'm hyped, and they have, I think they're off to the best 45 game start in franchise history, tied with the 03-04 season where they go to the Western Conference Finals. The offense, especially late in games, is disastrous. But I just keep coming back to, I think it's easier to fix. I just don't know if they will. And it might be the thing that come April, we're like, that's why they got bounced in the first round. Totally
Well, do you have
aware.
any theories on how they could fix it, or at least what needs to be fixed?
Yeah, I mean, running plays would be awesome. That sounds fun. They didn't do any of that. And this is, we can get into whatever direction you want with Finch or Karl or Ant. They just have low basketball IQ, even when Mike's out there, and they defer way too. There just needs to be another person. Like last night, love Anthony Edwards. He's going to make the All-Star team. He might make All-NBA. His ascension at 22 is insane. My maybe favorite player in the league. He waved off karl-Anthony Towns last night, late in the fourth, so that he could dribble the piss out of the ball to then do a sidestep fadeaway three-pointer from the corner. And that was, I think, his 11th straight missed shot of the game.
It was.
And somehow, I think it was Karl's fault, according to, like, online, right? It's like, oh my God, Ant missed 11 in a row. How could Karl do that? Just not good shots, right? Like, the only play they essentially ran in the final 12 minutes of the game was that, like, high pick and roll with Karl and Rudy that ended up, I mean, I don't think people gave that enough credit to how good of a find that was with Karl. His head's down, He's dribbling, he's kind of getting doubled. And to find Rudy, I mean, that is part of what this team is supposed to do. Play big, lean into being big. Mm-hmm. I don't always love, you said this multiple times, I don't love all the time that Finch has to close with the same five guys he starts with. I don't believe in that, but they do it, and they've closed almost every game with Karl and Rudy out there, so you got to find ways to make it work, and that play worked.
Well, I mean, Kyle's been closing has been in the games, and Karl's been subbing out for defensive purposes. I mean,
sure,
in the clip you're referencing there, Kyle Anderson subs into the game, and the whole,
but not offensively.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's just which I think is, I mean, I've been frustrated with Finch not just rolling out the five starters, and that at least at a minimum is like, let's do some offense defense stuff. I'm with that. A lot of people seem to hate that Karl got subbed out when he had 62 points in the Charlotte game. I don't personally, I'm just like, well, Kyle Anderson's your best defensive power forward. It's not close. That makes sense to me. So I don't know if I say that to me and whatever, like Finch is doing some things that aren't just rolling out the same five, which I feel like he would often do sometimes just out of being political, right? Mm-hmm. Don't want to ruffle any feathers. Rudy, we talked about this a lot with Rudy last year, or KAT. At least there's, I don't know, some of that's happening, and I think that's wise. That last defensive possession probably doesn't happen the way it does if karl-Anthony Towns is on the floor. Not because Karl's like trash at defense or anything. They just would have run the play to go at Karl. Karl's man would have came and set a screen, and they would have got the switch onto Karl. And that's a lot different of a proposition than Anthony Edwards or Jaden McDaniels. But continue.
So I have a question. Real question, not snark. When the offense bogs down, and it basically just has continued to bog down for every second half / fourth quarter, as long as, dating back to almost Christmas, we as a collective say that, like, Chris Finch, that's on you. You need to get better at that. So who gets the credit for then the defense?
Finch, yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay. Just because, like, I don't know. Sometimes I watch like Ant and Jaden lock in those last possessions, or the way they sub out 5. That was a monster.
Maybe I shouldn't even say that. It's all on the defense being good is on the players and the coach, and the offense being bad is on the players and the coach. And like to the plays thing, everyone knows who listens to this. I mean, for 18 months, I've been sitting over here like structure. I've been doing that. Like that is, I share this opinion that now everyone has come around to, that this team needs more structure and play sets. But an important distinction in what we often do as people who, played basketball when we were kids and stuff, and we think about what play calls were when we were playing shitty high school basketball, is it was like we did literal plays. It was like down screen, come up. And it was it was a scripted action with a scripted end result. That's not how offense works in the NBA. Offense in the NBA is like an option route in the NFL for a wide receiver. You read the defense and you take it long, or you make a slant, or you come in for a dig. That is how offense broadly works in the NBA, and particularly so in Finch's system, maybe more so than some other teams. And so you can make the argument, like, give them less options, right? And that's what I think structure is. But it's always going to be the case that when Ant comes off of the high screen on the weak side or whatever, and then is coming off of it to do whatever, there are 3 different reads that Ant has to do there. It would be bad if Finch was said, just do exactly this, like, because the defense could just take that away. A big issue with the fourth quarter offense in particular, and the offense for the season as a whole, is the players who are running the sets or the offense are bad at determining what option to take within the course of a play. And there is blame to be shared with the coach there for sure, but you have whose hands is the ball in all the time in these situations in the fourth quarter. It's Anthony Edwards, who is a prolific turnover player because he's a player that is still learning how to read gap help and what to do when that happens, and how to read low man help. And what teams are doing more and more and more as the season goes on, they're going in their scouts. Anthony Edwards struggles to read and effectively navigate gap help, and struggles to read and effectively navigate low man help. And what Ant does, because he can sometimes, is he has this outsized belief in his ability of like, I can get through this double, and then I can again get through and navigate at the rim once the big comes over to whatever, contest my shot. Finch can take away maybe some options or try and script it more, or take the ball out of Ant's hands more often. But at the end of the day, it doesn't work where Finch presses this button and the play just comes out and runs out exactly as it should, like when you're playing Madden. It's just not how NBA basketball works. So I'm frustrated with Finch. I think he should call more plays. But you have players on the team who are bad at running plays. That's why you're 19th in offense. That is it. Those are both parts of the equation. So I don't know. I mean, it's just so hard for me to put it all on Finch when I go back. And what I did before the Brooklyn game is I just watched like Ant's last 100 possessions, and it is consistently making the wrong read. And sometimes he does awesome shit through that because he's awesome. But this is what's going on. It's why his turnovers are spiking. Like, it's hard to do. It doesn't matter if you're Michael Jordan. It really doesn't. If there's 2 players basically guarding you and a third player loading up to help you, like, good luck, particularly if you have no shooters around you. And if you have one of your centers is in the dunker spot and Karl's at like 17 feet just lurking there, it's bad spacing. That's what Finch, more than anything else, needs to do, is say, get the spacing right and then make better options off of it. If they don't get the spacing right and they don't learn from their mistakes, and the decisions they're making, they're going to be a bad offensive team. We've seen this for 50 games. It's just the way it is. It's on all of them to come together and do it better, or yeah, you're going to lose in the first round. That's just how it's going to go. End of rant.
Kind of blacked out there for a sec because you touched on something that is like a real scar tissue for me. But back at the one and only South Middle School, when I was playing middle school basketball, which was at the high point of my career, we ran those plays for my best friend Ryan. It was just all dead end plays where it's like, oh, Ryan's going to get a pick and then he's going to run around and then he gets the ball and it's like there was never any flow. It was just like then Ryan has to shoot it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the end. It's not this, hey, we're going to run fist and it's going to be 3 screens and a little back cut and then Ant's going to get the ball and it's going to be a jump shot.
Right.
Like it's a from what I understand from my smart friends like you and Jake and stuff, it's a little more complicated than a dead end play. But they still have to navigate that. And actually, the little rant you went on was the answer to the question you asked me at the top of like, what is your hypothesis of how this works? There's a chance. I've been trying more than ever to just kind of pull myself out for a little bit, right? Like we are in the doldrums of just basketball right now. January is for all these teams a grind. We saw good teams fire coaches. We saw bad teams fire coaches this week. They still have at 32-13. They're not even at the 50 game mark. They still have like 38 games. I'm not saying that I'm just pie in the sky. They're going to figure it out. But there's also just a chance. All that stuff you just talked about is like maybe we're just 6 months from now going to be like, yeah, remember December, January, February? We just witnessed Ant learn again and grow. Like that whole I'm just going to hunt assists and help Karl out on Monday. That was embarrassing. But it also might have been like a learning lesson where he's like, oh, cool, maybe tonight I can just like facilitate. Now, you should do it in a more, Devin Booker-like way where you're still an offensive threat and you're putting pressure on the offense at multiple levels. But I know that some people just don't like that and whatever. But there's just a chance that this is just the growing pains of this team. And that's what I'm holding out for is that every night they just, you send Ant to the buffet and there's so many options. All these different reads he can do, and he's just getting a plate full of garbage. And it's like, actually, okay, let's condense it. You only get to go to the salad bar. That's it. Whatever you want to get to the salad bar, but that's all you get to do. Give him less options, good, but it also increases plays. So there's like a happy, Venn diagram of let's have a little more structure with a little less options to it. Mm-hmm. And you have a first read and a second read, and then you can, isolate. But those 11 shots that he missed, I looked at him again today. I think 10 of them were bad shots, like really bad shots. Like he had that one like spin around triple spin that even Grady and Jim were like, that was a difficult shot. When they say that, that's a bad shot. Okay. They're really respectful, but that's when they say that's a difficult shot, that's a bad shot. And then that corner 3 he took, they have to find more ways to get, and they also got a play to me is not getting Karl a 22-foot post up because that's what's going to lead to some of these turnovers. Last night he had 6, which again, I think turnovers are sometimes not all the same. So I wasn't like, oh, Karl had 6 turnovers last night. They don't win that game without Karl. Just like they probably don't win a lot of games in January without Karl. I have no idea if you know how good he's playing right now, but he's at like 26, 8, and 54% shooting and 50% from 3. So we can do more Karl stuff, but he's just been... You and I have talked about that Ant, I think, is this team's floor. And then, like, Karl provides them the ceiling. For the month of January, man, it's like karl-Anthony Towns is this team's floor and is their consistency. And then if Ant can figure some of this stuff out, he elevates the ceiling. It's almost flipped, in my mind, over these last couple of weeks and these last couple of months. And that's good. They still need to figure it out. Again, there is stuff for them to work on, but that's kind of, when I look back at last week or the week before, it's like maybe that's just what's going on. Like maybe these are legitimate NBA growing pains for a team and a player that's still trying to figure it out.
And what is allowing them to make those growing pains okay in the sense that they're still winning the vast majority of their games, is the defense is awesome. Pretty consistently awesome.
Pornographic defense. You said it better than anyone. I think they said on the call. That was a Mavericks, Kyrie, Luka moment last night, just against Mikal Bridges and Dinwiddie and stuff. They just... When they want to lock
when
down...
When they want to. That's part of it, too.
That drives people crazy, too. But, like, I don't know, man. I do pods, and half the time I just mail it in. Like, there's just moments where you're not going to play that level of defense every possession. No one does. There are defensive stoppers that play like that, right? Josh Okogie, shout out to him. They give you nothing offensively and play 18 minutes a game. So, yeah, the when you want to part is the frustrating part because in the playoffs, when you want to needs to be all 48. As long as you're on the court, you have to play that level of defense. But in the same vein, how many other teams or young wing duo, like name another team that you saw play defense like that recently when you're just scrolling around League Pass?
No, I mean, end of games and that when it's locked in and Rudy clicks into another level.
He was so good.
There's nobody. I mean, and he had another one of the LaMelo play at the end of the Charlotte game.
How did that make you feel?
Another one of the Cam Thomas plays.
How was the LaMelo? Like, I know they lost that game, embarrassing. Everyone should feel terrible. But I think
I said on the pod the next day that that's the best defensive play I've ever seen in person. And I'm like, I don't know if that is hyperbolic at all. Let's grab our first break. Today's show is brought to you by Stone and Skillet English Muffins. Kyle, have you finished your jumbo pack of Stone and Skillet English Muffins that they sent us?
I'm on the website now. I need the promo code again because I got to order more. But I did. I went through every flavor, and I swear by them, they're so good.
So we well, part of it is like we left one of the bags open, and then you like make your English muffins, and you forget to do the little twisty tie thing and put it back on after you buy the toaster. I'm like, oh man, I gotta throw these 3 away. Like they've been sitting out open. That was our last bag from the box they got. So, when Molly got groceries this week, like she must not have gone to Whole Foods where you could get these Stone and Skillet English muffins, and she got like different ones. And I was like, Molly, like, come on, these are the sponsor of the pod. But so whatever. The next morning, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make a different English. They're so different. I guess I'm not like they're extremely different. Like you get the normal whatever company English muffins. They're just like empty, like kind of air. And I have enjoyed when I've had these Stone and Skillet English muffins for breakfast because there's actually like something to them. There are 6 grams of protein in there. They're non-GMO certified. It's it's always an indulgence, like to have a big old piece of bread in the morning. But if you are going to, this is a substantially healthier and more like fulfilling way to be able to have this. And I know it seems silly that we're like promoting English muffins, but I'm like a toaster English muffin guy, like almost every morning. And having had these is something, that both of us have like would text each other like a picture of like, you have your English muffins.
Hey, now that was private.
Yeah. But we just think not only do we like the product, and another reason I was excited to bring these guys on as a sponsors. We're doing our own little entrepreneurial thing sure. Over here, and they are too. And Stone and Skillet's been doing this for 10 years. But what they've kind of built from literally their kitchen in Boston that kind of blew up on the East Coast and is now moving its way to the Midwest. And that's I appreciate that. And it seems something as silly as English muffins, but that's hard to do. And for me, like as a consumer, like I want to support that, more than just random item X. I always try and do that with all my purchases. So if you are an English muffin person, if you are a big breakfast person, I really do recommend Stone and Skillet. You can go to stoneandskillet.com and order these English muffins to be delivered straight to your home. If you want to do that, use the promo code Dane. They'll give you 20% off on your order. And if you don't want to order them in the mail and you are a Whole Foods shopper, just go over to the bread section there and pick up some Stone and Skillet English muffins. And can't use the promo code at the checkout counter, but you will be supporting a business that supports this show. So we're grateful for them. That's stoneandskillet.com. Again, promo code Dane for 20% off. All right, Kyle, where do we want to move next year? Do you want to go into KAT specifically, how he's been playing of late?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just curious. We talk a lot offline, but I haven't really heard you go into this topic because there's been so many other topics this week. But I guess just, are you aware of how good he's playing?
Yeah.
just curious.
I haven't watched it. Yeah. No, I mean, it's been, it's because Ant is in the middle of a bit of a lull, right? And, I think about it from the sense of, particularly the like, oh, if the Wolves move on from Karl-Anthony Towns and like, maybe Naz Reid can just move into the starting power forward spot or whatever. And I've thought about that the last 3 games where, both Ant and Naz have played, really poorly by relative to their normal standards. And having Karl be able to just give you like a baseline of competent and more than efficient offense as he has been lately, it's huge because it's making you not lose a game to a bad Wizards team. It's making you not lose a game to a bad Nets team. Obviously, you'd like them to be able to handle that on their own, but the reality is they wouldn't have been able to. They would have lost one or both of those games if Karl wasn't playing at the level that Karl was playing at. And then you take that another step forward and you go, all right, can we get 90% of this from Karl? Obviously, he's not going to be averaging 40 some points a game over the course of every 3-game pocket of the season. But can you get 90% of what KAT is doing offensively, plus having Ant get back to closer to his norm, having Naz get back closer to his norm, as those 3 are, 3 of the big individual offensive engines on this team. And you go, all right, that seems like a pretty reasonable path to moving this offense up into the realm that they need to be in. And from the Wizards game, that's what stood out to me. I just put down in my notes, I was like, KAT and Ant combining for 62 points, greater than one of them getting 62 points. There needs to be more of that over the course of the season, where it's KAT and Ant simultaneously driving offense in one game. And I think that's the frustration about the Hornets game and the Brooklyn game, is it was just one of them. It was just Karl in those games. And then there's been plenty of other games. I think of the Boston game earlier in the season where Karl really struggled, and it was all Ant. We aren't getting enough of both of them playing well offensively together. That's actually pretty strikingly rare, how often that comes together. But to your point from earlier, growing pains, right? And that's what we say about all these things that we're nitpicking about this team, is like, we're not necessarily pointing at it and like, this is screwed, the offense is going to be terrible forever. We're looking for ways in which, what different buttons can they push at the same time or push more consistently so as to drive more frequently efficient offense. And I think the biggest way to do it is finding ways to get KAT and Ant to be good offensively in the same game. And yeah, some of that is structure and play calling and that, and some of that is, it's doing it as as you're the players and you're Ant, and you go like, obviously, and he copped to this, like, Karl's rolling, you can't just take the night off, and
if Karl's rolling, it should make it easier for Ant to score.
Yes, it should.
So I said this before the break, but yeah, so in the month of January, 14 games, Karl's shooting he has splits of 54, 50, 86. 50% from 3 on 6 attempts. For a month, that's a kind of a season high. He did cop to, after I think the Wizards game, to our friend John Krasinski about how, what was his comment? I've heard people say that I should shoot more threes. So thanks for listening to the pod. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't completely bared out, right? I was a big believer in if Karl just took 3 more threes a game and Ant had 3 less isolations, that the offense would take up a little bit. Those numbers aren't there, but I feel like Ant is kind of on the opposite of a heater lately. Like, it just kind of, the cool thing about Anthony Edwards now is that he can give you 36 points in a game and you'd be like, I thought he kind of played bad. Like, that's just how awesome he's become as a scorer. But this month, he's just letting it fly a little more, at least from the eye test. And simple little sets. Nikhil does a good job of finding him kind of on those high pick and rolls where they kind of include Rudy as well, and then Karl flares out. But
pick and pop.
Yep, it just
screen the screener. Yeah.
Again, he doesn't jump on his jump shot, which is, I think, really sweet. I wish I could do that, but it just looks quick in a quick release, and there's still weird drives. There cannot be a team in the association that falls down more than this team, and you'd love for that stuff to stop because it's almost always a transition opportunity or bucket for the other team. But I just wanted to point it out that he's 26 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists this month. Less stray voltage than normal, I think. Obviously, some moments and stuff, but
for sure lately, yeah.
I just thought that this is part of, and it sucks. It'd be great if everyone else around Karl was playing really well right now offensively, because then those numbers would probably increase. But
that's what's interesting to me is in the games when Karl's 3-point volume really does go up. It's interesting when the theory is right. This team with more spacing and more 3-point shooting would make the offense better, right? Like that seems, if you're watching every Wolves game and you're seeing when the offense doesn't work, you go, it's not enough 3-point shooting, it's not enough spacing. And we knew we were going to talk about KAT's 3-point volume going up before the Brooklyn game when we were talking yesterday. And so I was just looking at it, and there's been 4 games this season where Karl has taken 10 or more threes. Obviously, most recently, the Washington and Charlotte games. And I was just the 4 teams he's done it against have all been bad. Toronto, Golden State, Washington, and Charlotte. Those teams have a combined record of 52 and 118. And I'm like, okay. And then I looked up the Wolves' offensive efficiency in those 4 games. And the Toronto game, where Karl shot 10, was the Wolves' worst offensive rating game of the entire season. The Golden State game, where Karl shot 12 threes, was the Wolves' 10th worst offensive game of the season. And the Washington game, where he shot 10 threes, was the Wolves' 15th worst offensive game of the season. And then the Charlotte game, in part because he was making more of them, it was their 9th best offensive game of the season. And that's more just an observation. I believe it's good for the Wolves offense to have KAT space the perimeter and shooting more 3-point shots. But what do you think that's about? Like, why has the offense, is it because it's rare that Karl shoots a ton of threes, that everyone's confused and, steps out of the way? Like, in my head, it makes sense that the 4 games that Karl shoots double-digit threes, particularly if it's against trash teams, I would have expected those to be all in their top 10 offensive games of the season. It's just, I don't know what that's about, I guess. And it could just be randomness, right? It could just be
that's what I'm pinning it on. Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, 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 that's all I heard you say. I just Jimmy Butler paper, just throw the paper over my shoulder. Because I live in a world, and it's also kind of, it's a fulfilling prophecy of, if they can't win games or have a good offense, when the self-proclaimed best shooting big man of all time is shooting threes and making them at a pretty absurd clip, 50% this month, then that's going to probably answer some questions come this summer. And we'll get to that point. But if he's on the team, I'm just, again, we're not really blaming anyone. We're just kind of looking at this sample size of this week or these 10 games or whatever, and just kind of who's been good, who's been bad, stock up, stock down. I just continue to want Karl to take a bunch of threes.
And me too. I was just...
But the stuff you said is really, really next level smart. I'm going to say, every time I say something good, it's small sample size. It's that's just small sample size.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't really care that maybe, what'd you say? You did that against a bunch of bad teams? Maybe everyone and their cousin just came into that with that same Charlotte Hornets mentality of bad team, right? But I also think too, let it fly against a good team, because you're only going to play those teams come April and possibly May. But I enjoy that he's letting it rip more, because I live in a world where I don't see how it's bad for Karl to take a lot of threes, especially if they're in, the flow of the offense. Some of that, I've never seen a big guy make that many threes before. When someone's going for 60, like Steph Curry, it's always a guard that's putting up those high numbers. So on that Monday game, it was just awkward to see a 7-footer putting up 60 some points. But I am just continue, let it fly, pro, can't hear anything else, no noise, just let it fly, because that's got to help. Because when you're talking about that, all I could think about, and we're talking about, hey, Finch, you got to run more sets and more plays and stuff. When the ball swings to Karl, pick and pop, and he lets it fly right away, I don't care about the result, that's good offense. When the ball swings in a set to Kyle Anderson in the corner, which is you got to let that fly, and he doesn't, well, then that kills the play. And now we're all mad at Finch, but it's the play got a good look. Kyle Anderson has no one within 10 feet of him, but he needed 12 feet to get the shot off. Yeah. So we shoot. Karl, shoot.
I have something that I think like kind of ties that together. I was noted the Wolves started the second quarter on a 9-0 run. First quarter was kind of sloggy, and then just Finch is kind of over the last few weeks like locked into a new rotation, right? Like Jordan McLaughlin's the ninth guy in the rotation every night, and it ends up being at the start of second quarters and the start of fourth quarters that it's the same five guys every time. It's Towns, Reed, Anderson, Alexander Walker, and McLaughlin. And they've been kind of like searching for that second unit. And initially it would be Gobert would be in there with it, rather than Towns. So it would be Gobert, Reed, Anderson, NAW-JMac. And Finch made an adjustment, I would say probably about 3-4 weeks ago, where he switched KAT and Gobert's rotations. So KAT is in with that second unit to start second quarters and fourth quarters. And I think that was based in the logic of, all right, we can't play lineups with Gobert, Anderson, and McLaughlin all out there. That's 3 non-shooters or 2.5 non-shooters. And so you put Towns into that. And I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm like, this is good. That lineup has more shooting in it. It's going to have more spacing, which you need particularly in the Kyle Anderson minutes, but it wasn't working. It was still problematic. And what stood out to me when those lineups played last night and more recently in the last few games is I think what Finch is doing is structuring the offense more. And again, it's hard for us to know exactly when a specific play set is called more often. But to me, it looks like with that group, Finch is saying, okay, we need more shooting on the floor. So we did that with Karl. And we also need more structure with that group, maybe because Mike Conley's off the floor to bring that self-made sort of structure that he comes with. And Ant's off the floor, who can just kind of create offense himself whenever he wants. So I think he's turned up the structure and play calling volume in that group with all the caveats of what we talked about at the beginning of the game. And I think that is a micro example of a thing that could help this team in the macro, right? Being intentional about the groups, all of them, whatever it is, whenever it's happening, being super intentional about reading what's on the floor and what you have offensively and scripting an offense according to that personnel. And that's hard to do over the course of the game. Because, like Mike Honore's got his rotation chart and they got it all plotted out before at the beginning of the game. But then Jaden picks up 2 fouls in the first 4 minutes of the game. And you're like, okay, now Nikhil's going to be in with the starters and everything else is going to be chaos, or Karl gets foul trouble, whatever. So it's a hard thing to do, I would imagine, as a coach, to be super intentional about these things within the chaos of a game. But to me, there needs to be some of that, like, less blind belief that they're just going to be able to sort of figure it out based on the group. And I think with this team, they need more coaching and guidance in those moments. And I think that's an example of Finch being able to do that. What I would just say is be more intentional about the other groupings that might need that too. And again, hard to do, but that's an example of how I think it could get better for this team if that happens on a more broader scale.
During that 9-0 run that you referenced to start the second, give me that 5-man lineup again.
Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jordan McLaughlin. I would say that is what we view as the second unit of this team now. Okay,
I think there was a lineup, but I just put in my notes that had Jaden in for Nickeil. So it was like a Naz, Jaden, JMac, Kyle, KAT lineup. I might have just made that up, but I thought that happened last night because I had that in my notes and said lineup was sick. So that's my analysis of that. But I'm with you on everything you said. I noticed that because you told me, but that they kind of switched the Gobert and Karl thing. But that lineup, and he still does it.
A perfect example of not having blind belief, right? Like, playing Gobert, Anderson, and McLaughlin was having blind belief in the idea.
Playing Shake Milton in NBA games is a blind belief because now we just pivoted to my new segment, Shake and Take, but you're trying to just assume that, hey, he's going to be able to play backup point guard. Or to your point on this second lineup, like, they're just going to be able to figure it out. And that's like where I want more structure is, this isn't, you can't just throw these 5 guys out there and think they're going to figure out. You got to give them sets and little more. Again, they're going to still do some free flowing stuff. This isn't like a Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, one read type thing. But you also, again, back to the ant stuff, you can't give them too many options. So I thought that second unit was really great. I thought that 9-0 run, again, they give you these doses, and it's probably why some people get so frustrated with them, is they give you these doses like that was good basketball on both sides. Pretty much everything made sense. How do you take that small sample size and try to extrapolate it out to, can we do that with more lineups? And again, so I was wrong. It wasn't Jaden. It was Nickeil. Just a quick, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, got to retire the jersey. He's so, I mean, he just, what did you say? Someone said this to me that Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they think is shooting 100%.
It should be like Rubio-Alexander-Walker.
Yeah, this is the Nickeil Alexander-Walker wearing 9 and Ricky Rubio wearing 9 is pretty much our version of the Nikola Jokic, Carmelo-Anthony wearing 15 in Denver. Like, we're going to have that debate this summer. But Nickeil, it feels like Nickeil is shooting 100% when opposing teams are going on a run. Like, he is the run stopper.
Yeah, well, he had one of the... Well, I mean, the fourth quarter was bad, right?
Sure. But
15 points. No. I'm going positive. KAT had 10 points. Rudy had 2 points on the one that KAT created and lobbed to him, and Rudy dunked it. And the only other points of the entire fourth quarter were that one Nickeil Alexander drived on the left slot, and then he had a free throw as well. So, it feels like bankable, like within the realm of a 3-and-D player. Like Nickeil's offense in that limited role is feeling pretty bankable.
And he's kind of becoming this team's Marcus Smart. Like, he's still only 24 years old, but he's an old 24, being in the league, being a lottery pick, kind of failing, kind of busting out. There are so many little things with him that you just really, truly maybe don't even catch on the first view of the game that never are going to be in a box score. His defense is nails, and he just gets into guys. He'll never have Jaden's length or Ant's physicality, but to be able to throw him out there in spots when Jaden is in foul trouble or Ant or they need a backup point guard, I don't have any stats. It's just vibes, but he is about as good of a vibe. He might be like my favorite guy to watch right now because he is calm under pressure, and his jump shot's never going to be aesthetically pleasing to shot doctors like you, but man, it goes in, and he's been a lifeline for this team during this last stretch.
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks as well. PrizePicks.com or the Prize Picks app. Promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus. Kyle, we've been doing this all season, given on the Friday show some prize picks that we like for the NFL slate this coming weekend. The one to obviously start with is they have basically a free square, which is Christian McCaffrey more or less than 0.5 rushing yards. So if McCaffrey rushes for a yard, you hit that one. What else do you have on your card that you like? Maybe quickly, because we're kind of running long here. For the slate this weekend.
Best weekend of football of the year. 4 best teams remaining: Chiefs, Ravens, and Lions, 49ers. So in that Ravens game, I like Lamar over 1.5 passing touchdowns. I think it's a little red goblin.
Oh.
So get a little spicy there. If he's going to be throwing around a lot, which I think Lamar will have a lot of passing attempts, Odell Beckham Jr. over 22.5 receiving yards. Kind of have him on ice, but someone's got to catch the ball. Mark Andrews is back.
It's down to 20.5.
Perfect. That makes me feel even better. And then that Christian McCaffrey free square, and then Isaiah Pacheco. He runs.
Do you want to get bold and do the Odell?
Yep, I do actually. Get spicy.
The 39.5 with
Odell over 39.5 now, and then give me Pacheco over 64.5 rushing yards. Again, he runs like he's a diehard Timberwolves fan, aka he's just pissed off all the time. So
how many? Which one do you want to do for
Isaiah Pacheco over 64.5? Yeah. So what does that give you for odds? You put Odell, Isaiah, Lamar, and then the free square. That
is, if you did $20, you would get 380. So that's 19 to 1 on this. I mean, I've been given some long ones on these recently, and we're not saying it's a 50-50 proposition that all 4 of these things come to fruition. I would say it's probably better than a 20 to 1 chance that all of these things come together. And that's kind of the point of Prize Picks. It's having that way of being able to do like $5. Again, if you just did $5 and you did, Kyle's pick here, if it hit, you get 100. And I think to me, that's what makes is a distinction between maybe the sports books and stuff that other states have access to. To me, this feels more like fantasy sports. It is daily fantasy sports. And I find that to be fun. So prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app, again, promo code Dane. Love how many of you are, send me, messages and stuff like that about what your picks are for the week. This is a fun sponsor that we like to have. So as always, we appreciate you supporting the sponsors that support us. All right, Kyle, where are we going next?
Well, I've praised Nikhil. I said Karl's been really good. The Ant stuff, there's not much more to say. Just a couple dud games. Last night might have been one of his worst games.
Back-to-backs again, man. I mean...
But also, too, my take was going to be is simply that, it's okay. Trust me. Let me put an arm around you. Come here. It's okay. Like, we can criticize him. He's built for it. His coach does. His teammates do. Like, it's okay. Guys, we're not taking sides. This isn't Republicans and Democrats. Like, Karl's playing well and Ant's not. That doesn't mean we have to have a civil war.
Sure.
And, back-to-back, he was, I'll just say it, he was bad last night. And if they lose that game, you probably got to point and say he lost them the game. But then he had... And that's why I love the kid. And I think at 22, he's going to become a face of the league, and he's going to become what we think he can become. Because when he couldn't get the shot to fall, he still made a winning play down the stretch by basically just sending Mikal Bridges to Rikers. It was awesome. But, I mean, I don't know. The only other thing I can think of is... I
really like on that Bridges play, too. He had the one reach that was like...
Don't do that. Don't do that.
But it was like... He does that all the time, right? Once he like really starts turning somebody and he gets into that like wall mode that he can unlock, and they start retreating a little bit in his head, it clicks like to attack. And to do that, that's going to be a reach. And if there's any sort of contact, more times than not, you're going to get blown for a whistle. And I thought he had the one reach that was like close and then he pulled back. There was another opportunity to kind of poke at it and he didn't. And that to me was big growth in that situation because you didn't need to steal it at that point. Bridges was already going to be getting off of it. And he did. He ultimately, swung it to it was Cam Thomas or whatever, who Jaden was guarding, who swung it over to Dinwiddie, who Gobert just like tarantulaed. And then, Mike Conley, as Dinwiddie tried to pass it, Mike Conley knocked it out of bounds. I hated solid is enough when it was the Wolves defensive game plan during the Ryan Saunders era. But it's not when you have elite personnel, particularly in that was the whole thing was like, we're playing drop coverage. And if we play solid is enough with Naz Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns, as our bigs, we'll give up those mid-range shots and that's going to be enough. When you have Rudy Gobert as your drop coverage center and you have four surrounding high-level perimeter defenders, solid is enough. You don't need a Malik Beasley possessions. Success is not determined by getting a steal or getting a block. Just being solid and forcing your man to make the next pass. That's what they did in both this flash bulb highlight against the Nets and Bridges as they did against Luka and Kyrie at the end of last season as well. It's just squaring your guy up, making them get off the ball. And Ant has the skill set to do that, I think, as much as more than anyone else on this team. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely fair to be criticizing Ant and have some frustration with his play of late. It's getting ridiculous to me that in year 4 back-to-backs are this big of a problem for him in terms of energy management. And it's in year 4 getting ridiculous to me how often he is spending time talking to the referees and not getting back to match up with his man, and how often that just leads to 1 pass, 2 pass, wide open 3 for the other team. And as Finch always says, immaturity can show up in many different ways. Those are the 2 key ways that immaturity is showing up for Anthony Edwards, who is 22 years old, but is every article I've read and podcast I've listened to about all-star starters in a loaded Western Conference, Anthony Edwards is a no-brainer on everyone's making, the All-Star team. So that's the bar, right? Like that's the level that I think is okay for us to hold him to. And an all-star player, one of the best players in the league, needs to be more consistent in their game-to-game and possession-to-possession behavior than Ant has been recently. It's not the end of the world. We've seen him do it at other times, but when he's doing this, if Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't pick him and the team up, they lose. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation for this team right now, I think, in relation to Anthony Edwards.
There's a chance, and I'm starting to believe this on some things, like on the court behaviors. But when people say, Karl's 28, he might just be who he is. I could see that. But with Ant, I don't think that. Like, I think he has more, and that's why if Karl is who he is, why would I be frustrated in certain things when he's not meeting my hopes or expectations? It was like, well, he might just be who he is. With Ant, again, the bar is so high. He's going to make his second All-Star team in 4 years. He's got his own shoe, maybe the best-selling non-Sabrina basketball shoe on the market right now. He's in movies. I mean, he's doing everything. I don't think Anthony Edwards plays defense like that last night if he's on the Hornets. And that's part of these growing pains things. Yeah. Is like, we used to think, is the Gobert Karl experiment going to be what dooms them or brings them to a territory that they've never been? I'm more thinking now, and we did this like 2 weeks ago, it's like, will Anthony Edwards be able to mature and learn enough? Like Doc Rivers is going to have to learn so much on the fly in these last 40 games to coach his team. Can Ant learn what some players take 6 years to learn in 4 years, right? Because they're going to need him to, all the bad stuff that he does, he is still their best player. He's still going to be the guy that wins them a playoff series or a second round playoff series. So that I Zapruder filmed that final possession last night. Like, there's so many cool aspects. Everything you said about Ant reaching once was awesome. There's really only one way to describe that defense. It's like a pit bull, because once he starts to see you retreat, he just gets like a taste of blood. The Jaden McDaniels clapping thing is just, again, so derogatory towards the opponent. I love that. But also, too, when you watch that, because all 10 guys are in the screen of that highlight,
yeah,
no Brooklyn Nets players are like turning to an official, being like, hey, that's a foul. And that was cool. That was as good of defense as you get in a game where you're only up 2, and if you foul Mikal Bridges, which Jaden ends up doing, he's going to shoot 2 free throws. Yep. So to play, I mean, that is towing the line of, there's just officials that would have called that. It wasn't a foul, but, you're towing the line of, I could lose the game for my team, or I could just single-handedly win it. And that type of stuff, man, is why I like tuning in.
Before the season, I think it was me and Brit pod. It's the preseason stuff, so we're drilling down into, like, it was probably in one of our Bigs episodes, right? So we're focusing on Nas and Kat and Rudy. And one thing I talked about in that time that before I was doing those, that's what it was. It was the Bigs episode. I went through and watched a bunch of clips or whatever from those players from the year before. And when I was watching the Rudy ones, I kept noticing how often last season, when he would catch the ball in the outside of the restricted area, like 8 feet away from the hoop, how often things just went terribly for the Wolves last season. And at that time, I was like, okay, so what's the answer here? Like, he's gonna be there sometimes. So if whenever Rudy catches the ball 8 feet away from the basket, if that's always a disaster, then one of two things need to happen. People need to not pass him the ball when he's there, which is just, kind of hard to do. Or Rudy needs to develop something that he can do from the short mid-range. And he's taken some mid-range shots this year. He's 1 for 7 on mid-range jumpers for the season. And, a handful of them, like, late in the shot clock. I think he's probably better than a 14% mid-range shooter, but, like, that's not it. Like, that's not the answer, in my opinion, of what to do in that little 8 to 10 foot range. And what I said on that pod with Britt, which I actually thought was kind of like outlandish at the time, because Rudy had like literally never taken a push shot. I mean, not literally, but not last season. And I was like, I think that would be a great thing for Rudy to do. Again, like most things Rudy does on offense that aren't dunks, not aesthetically pleasing. but you're looking for the best bad answer in those situations. And the push shot, I think, is pretty clearly the best bad answer for Rudy. It's something he did in the first couple of games of the season. And I was like, oh, light bulb on. I talked about this in September and I asked him about it. He was like, it's actually something I worked on a lot this past summer with the, when he was working out with the French national team and everything, about something he wanted to add to his game. And he had a few of them in the beginning of the year, made a couple, but I don't know what the numbers were exactly. It wasn't like a super profitable thing, probably better than a mid-range jump shot, or was. But then it just disappeared. And it stood out to me in the Washington game. He had a couple of catches there, and he just wasn't doing anything with it. Took one mid-range jump shot there, and I tweeted out after that Washington. I'm like, the push shot needs to come back. And then it was funny, or I guess prescient, that in last night's game against Brooklyn, I think he took 3 of them or 4 of them. And it is such a more, again, it's going to look ugly when it misses, but it is a more aesthetically pleasing. And I would bet a hell of a lot of money that shot goes in way more than him squaring up to take an actual jump shot there. I think that's actually a move you can do with like a little bit more force. He's just taking him when he's open. That's also one you can kind of like take a power dribble and like chest to chest, like more, even like a floater into somebody else. It's just really important that Rudy isn't an absolute zero outside of the restricted area. And I think that's a way for him to not be when teams are absolutely ignoring him when he's outside of that area. So I don't know, like let's put a pin in that. Rudy, maybe it was 2 for 3 last night. I think he took 3 of them, and I know he made 2, so it's 2 for 3 or 2 for 4. That could be something in the playoffs, because what are teams going to do in the playoffs, particularly against Rudy Gobert? They're going to try and find every little which way to make him a little less efficient and effective. That's an important thing to have in his bag. And I know it seems kind of small, but it's a completely new thing when comparing last season to this season.
And emotionally, that push shot is worth 12 points, because every time he takes it, the teams have not. What did you say? He's taken a dozen of them this season. It probably hasn't made its way through the film when opposing teams are scouting this team, because there's 12 shots in 40-some games. But every time he takes it and makes it, my first reaction is to just look at any opposing player or an opposing bench, and they are just, their souls have been zapped from their bodies. Right. So that's why I mean it's worth 12 points. I mean, it's just this little thing.
Because that's what you're being told in the scout is like, let Rudy catch there. Let Rudy do whatever there. Like last year, it was like the big loping Euro to the basket that led into some funky finger roll. Like, yes, if that's what the move Rudy's going to do at 8 to 10 feet from the basket is, by all means, if I'm playing against the Wolves, let him go do that. You feel like that's a win in a possession when Rudy catches the ball there. If the Wolves can make that a win for themselves, or even just like not a massive L, there's value in that. It changes the trigonometry and spacing of everything. If you make a couple of those, if you're Nick Claxton, you need to start respecting it a little bit more, which opens up Karl-Anthony Towns to like come in for a offensive rebound, which he did at the end of the game there. Like these things, it's not just that he made 2 of them. It's the like ripple effect of that and how in which he's guarded versus being not guarded in those situations. I actually think it's a bigger thing than, maybe we think it is.
And back to our middle school offense, mostly when Rudy catches the ball in that spot, it's not like on a short roll. It's in a different type of set, but it does feel like it's kind of end of shot clock.
Yeah, it's kind of like a broken play.
Yeah, you do need to have an option, right? And that goes back to, if it's just a natural, he gets it, he knows the situation, he knows there's 4 seconds on shot clock, to have that be the move, it just kind of makes the offense look better. And I know that sounds really weird, but it's not so stagnant. It's just a natural thing. Like even when I complain sometimes about these Kyle Anderson corner threes that are like great execution to get that shot, one of the best shots in basketball, if he's not going to shoot it, you have to immediately know that he's going to take a power dribble to kind of get his defender off to create something else. So I think it's great. Also, if they lose that game last night, we are probably spending a lot more time talking about Nick Claxton, because he was kind of doing that, right? I mean, he was 6 for 6, 7 for 7, taking those type of shots.
It's what centers in the NBA, who can't shoot threes add to their game.
Yep.
Like, I mean, give me any center who like doesn't shoot threes, like Nick Claxton. He's got a push shot. Rashawn Holmes, he back when he used to actually get minutes for teams, like he would do that. He would do that all the time. Jakob Poeltl added that last season. Valanciunas has more of like a power one. It's kind of more of like a hook. But these guys who don't or rarely shoot threes, you need to have, it's not even really in between game. It's just outside of the restricted area game. And I mean, Rudy is the best center in the NBA who doesn't shoot threes, but that's a low hanging fruit thing there that the other ones do have that I don't see why it's not something that Rudy could have.
6 of Nick Claxton's 8 made buckets last night were from 5 feet or farther. Really botched how I said that. But yeah, most of his points last night came outside of the restricted area. And that's not what Nick Claxton does. But that is a growth in a young center's game that, to your point, cannot shoot threes. So again, ideally, I would just rather have Karl take 3 more threes than Rudy take 3 push shots.
Yeah, for sure.
But you need to, in this more structured, less free-flowing moments of a game, you need to know what your end points are. You need to know what you're going to do when you get to the dead end. And sometimes when Rudy catches, it's a dead end. And now he has this opportunity to do that. So yeah, I think putting a pin in it is the most notable thing. But I want to see that because the jump shot doesn't work. I don't even know if I want to see a power dribble because I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I just push shot. That's the solution to that type of situation. And if he can even just hit it at an average level, it does open up a lot of things. Because last night when Nick Claxton was just kind of killing him from the mid-range, which is, again, is a weird sentence, it did fluster this defense from 1 to 5. So put a pin in it. Good job. Also, subscribe and like to this podcast if you're watching on YouTube or just anywhere, because I think Rudy's listening. I think Karl's listening. Everyone's listening. This is the best pod there is. So we'll continue to try to fix the Wolves one day at a time. I got one more thing for you, unless you want to wrap it up.
No, let's keep it. I got like a Jaden McDaniels and a Jordan McLaughlin thought too. So
Okay.
Let's grab one more break here and then let's wrap up for one final segment. All right, Kyle, which one do you want to do? Jaden McDaniels or Jordan McLaughlin?
You do your topic, and I'll close with mine. Jaden Jordan, whatever.
Yeah, okay. I can be brief. We can go through it. One, I just want to say, like, I think we've at times lost patience with Jaden McDaniels, the royal we, this season, and I think a lot of it is been fair to some extent. I've never got to the point of like, oh, you need to trade him or he's terrible or anything like that. But there's been for sure reason to be frustrated with Jaden McDaniels. I've just liked the kind of mix that we've got from him a little bit more recently, feeling more of the impact he has defensively. Outside of the Charlotte game, I thought he was one of the key mailer inners defensively in that game. But really loved what he did on Mikal Bridges last night in that game when he had that matchup. And his offense, which is always a small part of the pie, I like how he's grabbing it. He's not grabbing too much of the pie, but he's grabbing the piece of the pie that is there for him. And again, another like put a pin in it of maybe the beginning of something really trending upwards. If Jaden happens to have a great next 15 games, I'll go, yeah, we started sort of seeing some of the breadcrumbs of this in late January. So I like to see that. Thought that was meaningful. And then I guess this is more like trade deadline oriented. And I've sort of said this a few times, but as I start thinking more and more about the trade deadline, I'm less and less on the backup point guard idea. I'm not saying this team doesn't need a backup point guard. I'm looking at it through the lens of extremely limited resources to go out and acquire a player. And you could probably only get one player. So that's that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can make one move. So it's hard for me to say that one move should be backup point guard when I think that becomes, less of a need once you hit the playoffs. And I also just wonder, just because they go and get a backup point guard does not if it's a $5 to $8 million backup point guard, there's no guarantee, or I don't even know if it's fair to assume that player comes in and is substantially more impactful than Jordan McLaughlin is, who has his flaws. I still, he's been hitting some threes sometimes. I still view him as a quote unquote non-shooter because that's how teams guard him the majority of the time. But if we're looking at it through the lens of limited resources available and picks to be able to be traded or contracts to be able to be traded, to be matched, I'm putting personally, I would put that into something else. And then maybe backup point guard is addressed in the buyout market as like maybe more of a veteran piece that it splits it with Jordan McLaughlin or is just another option to sort of have there. That's just where I'm at. And I put that down last night when another time I'm like, I'm fine with Jordan McLaughlin getting minutes in this game. And I think the impact is just fine. So those were the last kind of two things I wanted to make sure to hit on from these last two games is appreciation for the JMacs, both of them, McDaniels and McLaughlin.
Jaden McDaniels in the month of January is averaging 11.5 points on 49% shooting from the field, 39% from three. He's taken 4 attempts per game. I think he's been really good. I don't really get the people that criticize him because we said in September that there's not much more room for him in terms of his plate. That was kind of like a organizational thing. It's like, I don't know how much more room.
They told us that repeatedly.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's on him if the people making the decisions are like, there's probably not too much more of a plate that he could even have because we have to lean into Karl and Anthony's guys. On the trade deadline stuff, which was I think now less than 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from yesterday, I'm kind of with you. I did see like this morning our friend Jake Fisher was like talked about how if there's any room for improvement for the Wolves, rival executives have indicated the Wolves are searching for reserve backcourt help. I don't think that pushes it back on anything you said because I think they just need another guard. That's been my thing, right? Like last night I texted you, I fixed the Wolves last night in trading for Lonnie Walker because you could do
Dennis Smith Jr. in that.
Yeah, I had Dennis Smith Jr., Shake Milton for Dennis Smith Jr. and Lonnie Walker, and that was like in how many seconds it takes. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to find. I mean, I watch this game or this team every night just like everyone else. I just come away from it eye test like they need another guard. They need another guard. And the Tyus stuff,
and
like
I agree with that. And yeah, sorry, I was
like the Tyus stuff.
Yeah.
I get that he's Minnesota, but like I really believe from what I like that it's going to cost a lot to get Tyus. I mean, you're seeing Tyus in like these 3-team trades with DeJounte Murray. I think the Wizards will hold out and try to get a first. The Wolves have depleted assets, but also too, like this team is only really going to go as far as Mike Conley and how much he can play.
I think if a Wizards point guard is on this team after the trade deadline, I think it's DeLon Wright.
Okay, and that's again, it's probably not going to be sexy
because that's like that. It's a lower money matching point, and it's a lower asset point to be able to acquire the player.
But you're going to play Ant and Mike damn near 40 minutes a night if you can in the playoffs until something happens or foul trouble or whatever. So there's more rest in between those games. I just don't see them making a big addition. I do think this is where you have a top 5 exec and the buyout market. That stuff is still, I'm like processing that in the moment. I know you are too, is like the new CBA, but there's a lot of teams right now that can't even get some of those buyout guys if they became available because of the new second apron and all that stuff. So,
and the Wolves might be one of those teams too. I mean, there's a limited amount of not for the reasons you're getting at, like the Gordon Hayward Celtics thing. That's being an apron
Kyle
team
Lowry thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But from the Wolves lens, they're like $2.3 million under the tax right now. So you could go get, a buyout guy for, less than that and put that into your 15th spot. You're cool, right? You're under the tax and they're not going to go into the tax this year. They're very likely not going to go into the tax this year because they're going to kind of be in the tax in perpetuity going forward, repeater tax, blah, blah, blah. So I say that to mean like, yeah, you could go get a buyout guy and be fine. But then when you go make your quote unquote Kyle Anderson deal or Troy Brown and Shake Milton, Wendell Moore combo salary out deal, then you can't take back more salary in that. And like Shake plus Troy Brown is $9.5 million and Tyus is more than that. So you do that. And now you're into the tax, and now people might say, well, put Wendell Moore in there or put Jordan. Like, I always say this because it's executives around the league have said this to me before too. It's the dumbest thing when you see the 3-for-1 and 4-for-1 trades. Like it's not that it never happens. So but it's just exceedingly unlikely just because it says quote check successful on the trade machine that sending out 3 or 4 players for matching salary for one player would get the deal done. It's just a far less likely, sort of setup. So that those are just some financial ramifications that I don't know one way or the other how they will navigate them, but it's something that needs to be navigated, if that makes sense.
And until ChatGPT creates their own NBA trade machine, we need to remember that it takes 2 to tango. So last night when I was on the trade machine, I was like, hey, Dane, look, I was able to get these 2 Brooklyn Nets guys for Shake Milton. And you're like, why would they do that? And I had no counter. I was like, well, what about a couple seconds? Like, it does. Why would a certain team, if you are solo on Shake and like, why would they do that, right? And that's where you probably all they have in the cupboard is some young guys that I'm not. This is another topic for next week, but I'm not. I don't think I'm going to put like Leonard Miller or Josh Minon in a trade just because I think we're going to hit a point where those guys become really valuable because they make no money. Wendell, we haven't really seen anything of. He's probably lowest on the totem pole, but. Yeah, they're probably not going to make a really big move, but I also would be literally shocked if they don't make a move because I watch all these games and backup point guard, you made a great case for Jordan McLaughlin and Mike Conley just playing a lot of minutes. But I'm like, I wish they had another Jalen Noel. I just think they need a microwave scorer. I know Bones Highland, all that stuff. They just need another guy that can get them some buckets, and that's kind of why I love Lonnie Walker. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure they'll be aggressive in the buyout market. They kind of have a lead up on their competition because the Phillies and the Denvers of the world right now can't sign some of those guys that are making over the mid-level that get bought out. So it's going to be a fascinating 2 weeks, but I would be shocked if this is the exact 15-man roster when we wake up on February 9th.
That's every indication I get is activity. Like they're not going to.
Oh, I'm going to aggregate that. That's awesome. Thank you. Dane Moore said Wolves will be active at the trade deadline.
Yeah, sure. Whoa. What was the other thing you wanted to bring up before?
Well, we can keep it short. I just probably a good time to close with this. I like Chris Finch. I'm just going to kind of I'm just going to jump on his back and ride it until it doesn't work out. And you know what? I've heard people. I've had conversations with people. Maybe this all in the long term becomes a Mark Jackson, Steve Kerr situation where Finch got him out of the mud, and then they need a different type of coach to make whatever this looks like next year and beyond work. I'm not at that level, but I just consume local coverage and national coverage, and I thought after that Hornets game, Chris Finch said and did everything I wanted. In the game, he was trying to pull strings. Like you said, he sat Karl, a guy who has 62 in an offensive defense spot. That's weird. I've seen teams do that with Jamal Crawford when he had 48. They subbed, it's not the weirdest thing in the world, but his comments, you disrespected the game. It was embarrassing. He called out his best players. I love that. Then it gets aggregated a little bit, like Bill Simmons, KOC. It gets on national pods that they, took the bus and ran over Karl and stuff. Whatever. I don't care about that stuff. I didn't love, for someone who loves Finch, I didn't love that there seemed to be, and we talked about this at Flagrant Howls, a specific, we need to walk those back before the Wizards game. And I don't know why, and it wasn't, and it's, again, this is not anything really big. From what I understand, and you understand, like the locker room is tight. They do look up to Finch. They love Finch. I just didn't, you shouldn't apologize when you do nothing wrong. That's my take. It's like, I don't think Finch did anything wrong after the Hornets game, so I didn't see a need to apologize. But from an organizational level, and maybe you want to talk about, maybe don't, it seemed like there was a real, we need to get out and kind of walk this back because it was like the first pregame question to Finch before a game where you should be focused on, are you guys going to bring it tonight?
The entire pregame show was, and it was brought up numerous times on the broadcast. I thought it was weird too.
Cool.
I think the way to think about this is why, right?
That's
what I always do when I go, why does something that makes no sense to me, why is somebody else doing it? And so I think when I put myself in that position, and I don't agree with this because I'm on your side of it. And none of the players had any problems with that comments. They said numerous times after the game,
there.
Like, they said everything he said was accurate. And then the next day at shoot-around, when Chris and John talked to Rudy and Naz said, yeah, whatever. He was 100% accurate. So from that standpoint, that doesn't present a why for the need to walk it back. The players don't have a problem with it. So I move on in my head to it's got to be something else. And I think the why is, and this isn't a Timberwolves specific thing. It is from being in media for a while, like teams react a lot more to national coverage than they do to local coverage. And what is being done instead. And like, yeah, I think they felt the need to walk it back because Bill Simmons, who I read and listened to Bill Simmons for a long time.
He's one of the people that got us into this.
Sure. But Bill Simmons probably has not watched a full 48 minutes of a Timberwolves game this season. He has not watched a Timberwolves game in person this season, I don't think. He's not a reporter. And that's fine. Bill Simmons is hugely influential. I just don't it's that weird collision of why does his opinion matter, but it does matter, And so I think the reaction organizationally or clearly from Bally, who went full fucking court press on walking this thing back, was a reaction to that. And I don't know. And then Bally is our team employees, and it's wanting to correct an incorrect narrative. So I get I get it. It was I listened to the Simmons thing. It was he ran over Towns and he backed up and ran over him again, and like House and KOC are cackling about it. That's inaccurate. I don't know. I guess it's hard for me in my role, in my position as somebody who covers the team on a beat level and is there at almost every press conference and media availability and that sort of stuff, is I want honesty out of the coach I cover. And I want him to be able to speak freely because I think that helps myself. I think that helps, the fan base. And I'm just a believer in transparency as long as, reasonably possible, and there's some restrictions to that. I guess I just didn't feel that this warranted that sort of restriction, because I think it's a bummer now. Next time Finch comes to a press conference hot, he's just probably going to water down whatever his, I don't know. I mean, maybe that is smart from an organizational standpoint. I've obviously never worked for a team, and maybe the impact is so profound that Bill Simmons is doing that. But like, I don't agree with it. And it was just, I mean, you and I started texting like right when that was happening before the game. You're like, I'm like, did I miss something? I don't think I did, because I was literally there when Finch said those comments, and when all the other players, I was in the locker room. I was just, I don't know. It was bizarre. And I think it's probably, we're talking about the, ant learning and growing pains or whatever as a young player. Like, the Wolves are new to being like good in the modern era, right? Like, and the attention and coverage that comes with it. So I think maybe it was just, I don't think any of this is some sort of huge deal or anything. I think it was just a reaction. If you're asking why I think it happened, I think it was a reaction to national media, which I think has a unfortunate, negative externality of watering down the coach and, doing some disingenuine coverage of the entire topic. But whatever, to each their own. Like, everyone gets their own platform to do whatever they want to do on it. And it's always important to distinguish that, a local broadcast is, they work with the team, so they are whatever they're working with the team and how they want to express how this all goes down. I think that's what it was. Putting up their shields and swords against the big bad national media.
Yeah, and I think it's another reminder, too, why I technically have worked for the organization, but that I believe in my heart of hearts that this is one of the best, if not best, NBA fan bases, because they have been given nothing and lost thousands upon thousands of hours and dollars investing in the worst team over the last 35 years. And I think that same way, again, I'm biased, I'm a part of it, but that the coverage of the team is really good. And it's why I've pivoted so much off of when the schedule comes out and it's like, how many national TV games do the Wolves have? And they only have 4 and everyone's mad. It's like, actually, that's awesome, because that's 78 games where I get Grady and Jim. I don't need the NBA people, the ESPN people, the TNT people that don't watch this game, right? Minnesota, flyover country. I want Grady and Jim to call these games. I want Alan Horton to call these games. And I want Britt Robson to be the guy that I read. I want Dane Moore to be the guy that I listen to, Jace and Chris and John. So I thought it was disappointing. And I'm a big Finch guy, but he did nothing wrong on Monday. And if I leave you with nothing else after 80 minutes, don't apologize if you did nothing wrong. And embrace...
But he kind of didn't apologize, I guess.
No, but just
right?
no. But they walked it back again. Let's just close on this. It was intentional. Wednesday, there was a lot of other topics that could have gone into that are basketball related, and it was intentional to try to massage that. And I think, if you want to be critical, organizationally at any team, right? Again, all 30 NBA teams, the local coverage is probably better than the national coverage. So,
but the national coverage has a bigger microphone more times, or
but the loudest people in the room aren't typically the smartest people in the room.
For sure. No, so obviously I on one side, like literally on one side of that equation. So I agree with you, because we're paying closer attention. But yeah, it's just one of those weird things, man. I don't
just another, also too, because you said it and you named everyone that was on that pod. I had a friend this week text me that said, "Are you Dane's house?" And I felt really sad about that. So I hope that's not the case. Because they'll have a house on and be like, "Oh, house, what have you been hearing?" And it's like, "Kyle, what have you been hearing in the league?" It's like, I don't know, whatever. I talked to Dane. Subscribe to Flagrant House. So no, a weird week, right? Again, that I keep coming back to these growing pains and these. I love being part of the book.
This is the life of being a good team, man.
Right?
It's different, and there's things to navigate that we have to navigate, and we're not perfect with it. It's so much of this is new, from the fan base to the organization to those of us covering it to, of course, the players and the coaches. It's just on a different platform. Nobody paid any attention to a Wolves Hornets game any year before this ever.
I prefer consuming series and streaming and stuff. I like the storytelling that goes and the ups and downs of character and stuff. I don't really love one-offs. I don't love movies. And this might just be, a novel, a series that we're going through this season of that Celtics loss. The way they collapsed was really embarrassing. And it was off of the 16-game death march. And then it was like, how are they going to respond? They have all these bad teams coming up. They've historically not been good with that. And they're 6-2 since that Celtics loss. A game that they 100% should have won. Just like they probably 100% should have won that Thunder game and that Hornets game. I mean, you and I have created this 4 columns of what good loss, good win, bad win. They continue to get some, I guess, bad wins, but that's part of the growth.
Oh, they all go in the left column, though.
Yep. I've 34 years earlier. Most of those years are a lot of bad losses and good losses, not a lot of bad wins. So. They still have a lot of games coming up. I mean, they have another bad opponent on Saturday with that Spurs thing, but then they get another crack at a team that has really impressed me. I've been one of the late people to get on board, but the Thunder are real, and they have a swag about them, and they're one of their Achilles heels in a positive way is that they are emotionally mature for their age, and they know how to execute down the road. So the Wolves bring in more size, they bring in more talent, and that's going to be fun. But this is all part of the journey, and it's been another eventful week for this team, but 32-13, man, that's a thing. So
speaking of the Thunder, we're recording this on Friday morning. I recorded with Alex Spears, who covers the Thunder over at The Athletic, yesterday morning, on Thursday morning, about the Thunder Wolves matchup on Monday, kind of going back through the 3 previous times that the Wolves have played them, and this will be the 4th and final time that they played the Thunder in the regular season. I thought it was a really fun conversation. I love doing that sort of thing, of being able to kind of drill down into a matchup, almost like it was a playoff series. So I'm gonna do a little, on Sunday morning, do a little quick reaction to whatever happens in the Spurs game. 5 or 10 minutes of just me, and then I'm gonna play that 45-minute conversation I had with Alex Spears, which I think. I enjoyed it, at least, and I think it'll be a fun way to kind of look ahead to a different type of opponent. Like the Wolves are playing themselves against the Wizards and the Nets and the Spurs. The Wolves are playing the Thunder on Monday, and they need to do specific things technically so as to be able to beat them. So look for that conversation coming out on probably sometime on Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon.
The Wolves are playing themselves on Saturday, but the Thunder on Monday. That's a bar. Good way to close. Good stuff. That's a real analysis. I
think that's just true.
But again, we are now out of this phase, right? And the Thunder come up, January ends, and then February gets a little tougher. But just chapter by chapter, I mean, we are now less than 2 weeks in the trade deadline. Yeah. With a gun, they're going to do something. And then it's all-star stuff.
You with a gun are going to do something, or they?
No, wait, yeah, cut that. I believe they're going to do something. I'm not Malik Beasley. So they should, add to this and continue to experiment and figure things out, and maybe they grow and maybe they take a step back. But if nothing else, on this week, this segment of games, from that Thunder game to this next Thunder game, I think we learned a lot about them. And that's not always positive. I think we learned some bad things about that Hornets game was really, really, really bad. But they did then, however gross it was, go on a back-to-back on the road and win both games. And they need that because the West is a bloodbath at the top, and they're going to have to keep up with the Thunders and the Nuggets of the world and, the Suns, who have won 7 straight all of a sudden. So we'll get there. Happy Friday. Happy Australia Day.
He's Kyle Theige. Flagrant Howls, you and Phil recorded Thursday or Wednesday or something.
Yeah, we did a couple. We're trying to do 2 a week. Yesterday, we spent most of the pod just going over the 2012-2013 Timberwolves roster that had 19 guys on it. And I bet do you remember Chris Johnson, the 7-footer?
Yeah. He got MVP chance at Target Center. I remember that.
No way.
Yeah.
I just always...
And Mikhail Jello-Bale?
That's
That's
right? That team. Lou Amundsen, JJ Barea, Brandon Roy, and one of my 5 favorite Timberwolves of all time, Andrei Kirilenko.
So that's what you talked about.
Yeah. Flagrant Howls. Subscribe and like.
All right. Check out Flagrant Howls with Kyle and Phil over at Score North's YouTube channel, wherever you get podcasts. And obviously, you're following Kyle for his game by game tweet of how they get 32 wins, and you reference the last time they had whatever. I don't even know how that all works. But you're following Kyle over there on Twitter as well, and please be following us on Instagram and TikTok, as we're going to try and turn the volume up on greater frequency of just sort of some social content there. And we appreciate those of you who are looking at us on here and watching on YouTube too. You can subscribe to youtube.com/@DaneMooreNBA. That helps us out too. Until Sunday morning, where I'll recap the Spurs thing a little bit. We'll talk some Wolves Thunder. He's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.